Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second sort of episode of my podcast. I have a name for it now, and it is called the Beyond the Box podcast. And sort of the reason for the name is that throughout my life, I'm in my early 20s, I always look for things that are a bit different, a bit outside of the norm. And I tend to gravitate towards these types of things. And I genuinely talk to people and study people and things that I find interesting, but also a little bit different. So, with that theme, my guest today is an academic, Professor Carl Gombrich, and he is the head of faculty, if that's correct, head of
Yeah,
faculty at the new University of Interdisciplinary Studies, London Interdisciplinary School. Have I got the title correct?
yeah.
So, welcome to my podcast. You are the second guest, Professor
Thanks,
Gombrich.
Sammy.
Can I call you Carl?
You can.
Okay, just as a little introduction, tell me a little bit about you. You can mention how we know each other, and yeah, tell me about your work and how it is you, in your opinion, beyond the box.
Thanks, Sammy. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Great to be here. And just so your listeners know, Sammy was a table tennis coach to my son, and I wish I'd had Sammy as my table tennis coach. He was fantastic, and I love table tennis. I'm sure I could have made great progress under Sammy. But we're here about a year on, haven't we? Since we probably saw each other
Oh, it's
last, maybe
longer than that.
a little bit more, 2 years now,
Or
maybe.
maybe in
Yeah.
a year and a half.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I'm delighted to be here. So, so did you? Hey, so you want to hear about the current university, my role here, or a bit further
Just
back?
about you and your university, and what is it about you and the university that people might view to be beyond or
Oh,
outside the
beyond the
norm?
beyond. Good, the beyond question. Yeah, great. So I'm an old guy, Sammy. So I'm not going to give my whole life history, at least not in this first pitch, because that'll take your whole podcast. But to sum it all up, I've got a very eclectic background. So that is sort of beyond, I guess. I have degrees in maths and physics and philosophy, but I also was an opera singer for a while, professional opera singer, and I was the Royal Opera House Scholar at the National Opera Studio, which is like an elite postgraduate course. They only take 12 people a year, and I was the Royal Opera House Scholar, and then I had a short career as an opera singer as well. I won't tell you now quite why I left opera singing, but basically it wasn't me. I'm too much of an intellectual. I enjoy complex ideas and the life of the mind too much, and maybe it's surprising, but singing isn't that much of an intellectual life. It's an artistic life, but not that intellectual. So I moved away from that and I started working for UCL in about 2002, the great university in London. And then 2010, I was invited to set up what was then the first Bachelor of Arts and Sciences in the country. Because traditionally, you can only get a BA, Bachelor of Arts, or a BSc in this country. Like never the twain shall meet. And I was like, why? There's just so many things in the modern world, whether it's about, user experience. It's a mixture of arts and psychology and graphics and economics, or even sustainability now. There's a humanistic element to it. There's a scientific element. There's a social science element. Why are we so limited by what we're told we can do at university? So we had to go on UCAS. We created a new BASc degree, and I launched that program at UCL, and that was a big success. I hadn't been particularly successful till then. But partly because I'd done so many things, actually, kept jumping around. But this wonderful job sort of made my life and my career. And that might be interesting for some of your listeners if they're younger. I was in my 40s when that happened. And I can tell you, your life can change massively in your early 40s, even if you get the right job for you, you find your thing. And I was invited to a very prestigious group called the British Academy, which is like the elite social scientists and humanists in the country. Professors far, far greater and more eminent than anything I'd ever done. I don't even have a PhD, which people still find hard to believe. Um, I've got degrees but no PhD, and so I contributed to a report on interdisciplinary. I can't even say the word after all these years. Interdisciplinarity for them, and we'll come into what more interdisciplinarity means in a minute. But you start for interdisciplinarity thinking, why are we dividing arts and sciences? That's a good way to start. Why have we divided up the world first into arts and sciences, and then to all these subsections?
Mm.
And then once you start to dissolve that, you get the beginnings of interdisciplinarity.
Can I
And then you,
just pause
yeah,
you for a
yeah,
second?
go on. Yeah.
The UCL degree, does that still exist?
Yeah, it's a big success. So I grew up, it was the largest launch in UCL's history. So it's 84 students in the first year, which I checked with the UCL historians, was they think the largest launch. They can't find a bigger one anyway. And
Um,
then I grew it to about 130, and now it's about 180, 177 per year intake. So it's right up there with the big beasts like history and economics.
mm.
It's massive.
So I also studied an interdisciplinary degree. I went to
Yeah.
the University of Warwick and I studied politics, philosophy, and law. But the thing is, I have the greatest of respect for my university and my professors, etc. But only 1/12, if that, of the degree was interdisciplinary. In my first year, there was a module of politics, philosophy, and law. And then in the middle, fourth module, it was a PPL designated module where there's
Mm,
actually blending of the subjects.
mm,
Apart from
mm.
that, my other 2 years, all the subjects were still segmented and they were still separate. So it was like, am I studying an interdisciplinary degree or just a bit of politics, a bit of philosophy, and a bit of law? So the UCL degree, is that the same? Um,
No, I think it's better than that. I mean, that's a great challenge. You're absolutely right. It sounds like a bit like you were doing kind of a joint honors, but it was a three-way joint honors, really.
yeah, yeah, but they marketed it as interdisciplinary.
Yeah, interesting marketing because a bit of a cheat. I agree. Yeah, so it comes to the question exactly of what is interdisciplinarity, and it has to involve some sort of contrasting of different disciplines or melding or synthesizing of different
Mm,
disciplines. So in the UCL, basically half the degree was called the core, and that was much more interdisciplinary. We had things which deliberately crossed boundaries, sometimes sort of no boundaries. We had a very practical module where students had to act as a consultant. Student groups acted as a consultant for an external organization. So that's almost like non-disciplinary. Like, what tools have I got here? Can I write a consultancy report? So the core of that degree, I'd say, was genuinely interdisciplinary. We had a module called interdisciplinary research methods. I think now there's a second level module of that, and so on. So that was genuinely interdisciplinary. 50% of the degree was more like the American liberal arts system. So it was like you experienced pick and mix. But I think the big win was because they were doing an interdisciplinary core, they kind of had a flavor for how to combine those different things. So when they got to their final dissertation in the final year, they generally and genuinely often did something quite radically combining, data analysis and culture or
mm,
something on,
mm,
gender and biology, but from the gender studies humanist perspective and then the biological perspective. So they were genuinely mashing up some quite contrasting things by that point because they'd had some of that kind of more interdisciplinary foundation.
mm, mm. This kind of leads on to my question. You alluded to it a bit earlier, but we segmented off on a tangent. But what does it mean to be interdisciplinary, and what are the philosophical foundations and reasonings for that name, and also for the reasons for the school, the university? Why does it exist? So the
So
basis and the school.
let me start with the school though, because it's a bit more practical. So after I grew that degree at UCL and it really sort of made my career, they made me a professor. So I'm a full professor, which was granted to me by UCL, and I carry that title in my new institution. Um, I got bored because I'd got a flavor for entrepreneurship, being an entrepreneur in an established
Love
environment.
that. That's brilliant.
And I never knew that was me, but it was just I needed to find a place where I could be an entrepreneur. I've always been sort of creative and a bit beyond the box, always
Mm,
doing sort of slightly different or the wrong things. Your parents saying, settle down, do something. I was like, I want to do this, I want to do something new. So it was great, it's perfect for me. Great, big, established Rolls Royce of an institution. But I was sort of given carte blanche to be a big entrepreneur and create a big project. And I did that, and it was really stable and it was growing and it was a big beast, but I got bored because I'd been doing it 8.5 years. And I just didn't want to hang around into my 50s and 60s being like this old man of interdisciplinary education, constantly rolled out and saying the same things over again. So when the guy setting up the London Interdisciplinary School came along to me, and I met him on a board of another uni already and said, we're starting a whole new uni kind of based on your lines. I really didn't need any persuading. I was like, let's go. And what I wanted to do and what we're doing here is I wanted to go the next turn of the dice all together. It's like, no, we don't do any subjects here. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. And we do a lot of real world applications. So
mm,
all our curriculum is based on real world problems. What is inequality? Why do we care? What should we do about it? What is sustainability? Does it matter? What are the different views about it? What is technology and ethics? Is it about AI or is it about access to broadband? Whatever it might be. So we always have a big, chunky, real world issue right in the middle of the curriculum for the first 2 entire years. And then we teach methods to tackle the problem. So we teach, that's where you get much closer to the traditional subjects, but we don't emphasize what we call canons of knowledge. It's not like read this book, read all these papers. We'll teach you data science so that you can go and look at the statistics on sustainability and analyze them. We'll teach you how to make a great video so that you can make a campaign video about inequality and you can then go and tackle inequality that way. So we teach lots of methods and we teach they're the ways to tackle the real world problems. And that's it. We don't have any academic subjects. We teach methods and we teach problem through problems and methods to tackle those problems. So that's what we're doing here, and we think that's coherent. We think it's needed because it's much closer to the students' real interests. You know, a lot of these real world problems, migration or AI, or always whatever it might be, what people care about. And we just don't see that in the sector. We're still telling students very largely to read all the same books. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love those books, and there has to be a place in our society for lots of people to read all the same books. That's all great. But there also has to be a place in our society for students who think, how is this actually relevant to what I really care about on a day-to-day basis and what my career is going to be? So we do a lot of internships. We work with a lot of external organizations. Our students do lots of projects for and with them. And there has to be more of that in the higher education sector. Otherwise, it just is literally ivory towers with no connection to the daily life and work of the students themselves. So we're doing it. We're in our 4th year of undergraduates now. We graduated our first cohort last summer, which was amazing. And yeah, it's a fascinating and amazing and demanding, very demanding, but worthwhile project.
Brilliant. And I guess philosophically,
yeah. So you want to know what it is?
What? Just
yeah, sure.
Elaborate if you can.
So I mean,
it's very deep, but
it's so simple in a way. It's so simple, but like a lot of very big, simple ideas like democracy or love or whatever. It takes a lot of unpacking. So basically, interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary research or teaching is research or teaching that combines the knowledge and methods from 2 or more disciplines to create a knowledge output that you couldn't have done without those 2 or more disciplines. So it could be knowledge output in terms of literally an academic paper. It could be an intervention into a social issue like inequality or obesity or anything really. And it's so obvious in the real world that people scratch their heads about that. How come this isn't done everywhere? Because how are you going to implement, sustainability policy unless you understand some chemistry, something from energy, something about economics, something about politics? It's fine to just learn those things in isolation, but they don't come together if you actually want a policy and you want to explain what you're doing to politicians, to the public, to the media. And virtually everything you think about, once it involves people, you're going to have to be interdisciplinary about it. So, I mean, I literally have now hundreds of examples of my students that work in sectors. So let's take another one, literally off the top of my head. So like food, right? You're looking, could be food security, could be lab-based meat. You have to think about the science, you have to think about the social science, you have to think about psychology, the ick factor, you have to think about the economics. But the focus of the actual problem is very clear. It's food, it's sustainability, it's user experience I mentioned earlier. But the only way to tackle those problems properly is by being interdisciplinary, by taking 2 or 3 or sometimes more subjects and understanding what those subjects tell you. Sorry, I shouldn't be clicking my pen on the podcast.
I can't hear
it. Understanding what those subjects tell you about the problem you're trying to tackle. And so what then bubbles up is people get anxious about, I know this subject deeply. Well, I know it deeply. And I'm like, you will know about the problem deeply. And that's much more important than knowing about some academic subject deeply. So many of my students now are just bombing up the career ladder because they are the go-to people on something like supply chains for food. Or so one of my students is doing very well in a major insurance company in Germany, and she is a global expert in climate change resilience of small island states to flooding due to sea level rises. But so people go, what'd she study for that? Well, I can tell you she studied a mixture of engineering, anthropology, because she's about how you get buy-in from local communities for these engineering interventions, politics, economics, sociology. She's got the whole package, and that's why she's an expert in this really niche thing, which is it's niche in one way, but it's multi-billion dollar business, right? She talks to governments, she talks to major construction companies, she talks to insurance companies. How can we help small island states become flood resistant? And so virtually anywhere you look, you get real expertise by combining things in an interdisciplinary way,
Mm.
focused on the actual problem you're interested in, rather than going down your academic rabbit hole, thinking, oh, I've got to do 10 years of history before I'm a proper historian. Fine, you want to be an academic, do that. Really, we need some people to do that. I'm not trying to kill off academics. I'm from an academic family. I'm an academic. But we do not need 50% of the population learning in that way. 10% maximum. The rest of them, they should see how what they're learning applies to actually tackling problems and become expert in real things rather than individual academic subjects.
Mm. This is brilliant. What I'm listening to is it's
Thank
like
you.
music to my ears because as a university student, like maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I found myself disillusioned with subjects that I thought I'd be interested in, but I found myself, it gets to a certain point where it's not going to be constructive to overly pontificate about things. Where's the reality? Where's the grounding in actual things? How can I apply what I'm doing to this? Oh, there's a feminist perspective on something. There's a sociological or racist or
Thanks.
like
Mm.
not to get too into the woke stuff, but there's loads of
Yeah.
perspectives. But how can I
Yeah.
use them? And I found myself disillusioned and thought, okay, let me just go, leave, graduate, leave. And I found myself doing what I do now, where there's actually application of what I learned, politics, philosophy, and law. Particularly in coaching, there's philosophy, but there's also a political element where you have to understand people and situations and where they're coming from. And law, okay, you have to work in schools or institutions a little bit.
Hmm.
So I'm applying
Hmm.
certain things, but it's much more
Hmm.
grounded in reality. And what you're saying about your students is they have the methods in and the actual skills to apply genuine change, hopefully, in specific areas. And that actually gives the skills to do and the mindset. This is what I see, the mindset and the capability to do it in others rather than
Yeah.
pontificating about something and going, oh, how do I actually apply this?
Yeah, I think the mindset's a really big thing. It's really hard to scientifically measure, but I know my students, the students from the degrees I've been responsible for, come out very brave in terms of learning. They're beyond the box. They're not phased if someone says, can you do this?
Mhm.
And they say, oh, I'll give you 3 weeks to learn it or upskill and do it. They're like, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go. And I think that's a real massive added perk bonus of being in these interdisciplinary programs. You've had to confront completely new knowledge areas you know nothing about and learn for a project. And so when a new one comes along, like, yeah, I can do that. Whereas if you've just done one degree for 3 years, that's much less likely, I think.
Mm. Mm. Brilliant, brilliant. Um, would you say, I'm moving to the next question, our
Sure.
culture, whatever that means, um, you can interpret how you wish.
Yeah. Your
Our,
culture or mine, Sammy, that's the thing. Table
so,
tennis culture or
no,
academia?
no, our culture, like society,
Okay.
society. Is
Yeah,
it
but it,
disciplinary or interdisciplinary? Like, is this?
that's a good question. I would say culture is absolutely inherently interdisciplinary. I mean, the world is interdisciplinary. The world doesn't see academic subjects. It doesn't see the boundaries that humans see. But we create categories to think. We need them to think, and we create other boundaries for bureaucratic and administrative reasons, which we also need. So um, this is actually really kind of a geeky point within interdisciplinarity, but it's worth raising, I think. It does have a bit of a reputation for interdisciplinarity of sometimes descending into a bit of anarchy, a bit of like a mush because you're like anti-disciplinary, smash it all up, where's the boundary? There's no structure. I'm actually really against that because it's funny because in some ways I'm quite a classical thinker. I like logic. I like rationality. I
Mhm.
like reasons for doing things that you can argue for properly.
I think that's
And
your methods. It must be methods.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you can challenge reason all the time. Of course you can, but with reason, with other evidence and other discussions about evidence. So um, I think those that say, um, there should be no boundaries, and culture is just a great big mush. I don't agree with that. I don't think it's helpful for thought or anything, actually. I don't think it's helpful for progressives either to do this sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the world is inherently interdisciplinary or non-disciplinary, really. The world
Hmm.
is who knows, it's something out there, but it inherently involves a lot of connections, a lot of interactions. But I think in order for society and culture, in your word, and even our thinking to be worthwhile, we do need categories and we need some kind of disciplinary boundaries. I think of it sometimes like a river, delta of a river. Like it splits into many parts sometimes, then it comes together at other parts, and you get a strong stream, which is three or five bits together. Two bits are off here, then they break apart again, they come together. You see that in the history of knowledge a lot when things fragment, sometimes too much, and then they come together, sometimes too much, like in a say, monotheistic thing where
Hmm.
that's all you think about is what the religion says about the world and nothing else. So it's that kind of play between breaking into parts, which can be positive, or it can be too fragmented, and coming together,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
likewise can be positive or negative.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think the balance, what you're saying about the balance and the ebb and flow, I think that's right. I can just only reflect on my own personal experiences with coaching. Sometimes there's a science to table tennis.
Mm,
That
mm,
there are rules that you have to follow
mm.
for someone to improve, but then there's scope for fluidity. Uh, just it has to be made right.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Sports coaching is really interesting like that, isn't it? Because it's definitely part science, part art. It's
Mhm.
we've
Mhm.
learned so much from the science the last 20 years. I so wish I was young, starting out in sport now, because the way, if you're sensible, you can leverage science, everything around your diet, your sleep, your
Mhm.
personal body evaluation. It's just phenomenal,
Mhm.
fascinating. But but it still remains an art, doesn't it, at the
Mhm.
very top level for those, why, with all the same data given, why would Pep Guardiola be a much better manager than me of any football team? So there's art there as well,
Yeah, I
definitely.
mean, in another respect, um, it according to a disciplinary society, I should have no reason to be a table tennis coach because I didn't study sports science. Um, I I guess I didn't do a degree in table tennis. I have expertise. I did a couple coaching courses, but they're not really anything major. Um, but yeah, I do it, and I think I'm fairly successful at it, and I coach every level of play. So that
Mm.
runs counter to a society that says, right, you need to study this degree to get into this. Or it could be that table tennis isn't mainstream and it's more amateurish, and then less qualified people like me do it. But the two things can be true at once.
If you're coaching right to the top level, you've got to be pretty good at to coach up to
Well, it's a
national
journey.
level.
It's a journey. But
Mm.
yes,
Cool.
would you say that capitalism plays a role in creating certain like senses in people that, oh, I'm this, so that I can't do that? And
Mm.
in terms of the specialization of labor, that people are kind of, in a way, through certain cultures, made and molded to be a cog, and they just
I
fit
don't
in one
think,
place.
honestly, I don't think capitalism is a determinant there. I think communism was a very, very segmented society. China, although China's a funny one now because it's such a funny mixture of capitalism and communism, but Soviet Russia was very, very siloed. And there's some arguments, actually, there's some historical arguments that the reason um, the West won against communism and Nazism actually is that there was better sort of communication between scientists, military, and politicians and so
Mm,
on in the
mm,
West. A more open, basically a more open
mm,
society
mm,
is a stronger society, both internally and externally. Whether we carry on seeing that, I don't know, but there are some serious attempts at historical analysis that show that democracies are militarily stronger because they share better information. And that would play into the whole kind of interdisciplinarity of the world and mapping the intellectual and scientific world more onto the world by not being so rigid, which is what communism and theocracies are. I um, I think, I mean, capitalism has its problems, right? We know it's in trouble. I'm particularly interested in inequality. I've read Peter Turchin recently. He's fantastic, and this brilliant young British economist called Gary Stevenson.
Oh, I love him. He's great.
Yeah, he's
I would
amazing.
love to speak to him one day, but I need
It's
to get
well,
like
if
a
you get his
channel.
number, let me know. He's very, very hard to get hold of, and I understand why. I
Well, you
can't
have
get
his
his number.
number.
No, I can't get his number.
Okay, okay.
I
Monday.
may know someone who can. I may know someone who knows someone who gets.
I'd love to speak
Um,
to him.
but yeah, so I mean, that for me is a big problem with capitalism, which has in it the seeds of its own demise. It can be managed, and Turchin, not Stevenson, Turchin, has some examples of when we've managed to manage down inequality and save society. But generally, I think capitalism is a good thing and works for freedom and innovation and all that. I do think. Communication revolutions lead to more interdisciplinarity. So once you have books like Gutenberg created in the 15th century, and people are reading stuff and saying, well, why are we being told this? Why are we being told this is the way we have to behave, or this is the way to treat our wives or milk our cows or whatever the thing is?
Mhm.
I've read this other book that says this, and my mate down the road, he's another book, and he told his wife that, and she told me this. Then I think you do get these kind of flowerings of also goes with kind of a renaissance, flowering creativity, also quite a lot of turmoil in society. It's not all good by any means. In the long run, it's good, but it creates a lot of disruption. And I think we're living through that now. So particularly social media, but the internet in general is just the most unimaginable connector of people and ideas. And, if you explained this to people 100 years ago, they would have thought we were living on another planet. But
Mhm.
that is just mashing up and crashing through all the boundaries that people try to create and then maintain through bureaucracies and
Mhm.
institutions. In both very positive and very creative and exciting ways, and very
Yeah.
disruptive
The
and
balance
concerning
isn't
ways.
right. The balance of the what we spoke about, I think, is not right currently. I think
What
10
do you
years
mean? Which balance?
of social media communications, how it uplifts society and makes it flower, compared to how it can degrade society. So my perspective is obviously the news and how people communicate about certain informations about, and ideas more in the political sphere. I would say things have degraded. But I guess maybe in your circles or what you're talking about academia and ideas,
I mean,
it might be different.
I'm on Twitter, Sammy. You can't really separate them anymore. I mean, last night I didn't really want to. It just flowed through my past line. I watched Liam Thingamy fall to his death from a balcony.
Oh
That
Jesus,
balcony.
I haven't even seen this.
And this is the One Direction guy. I
Yeah, I
mean,
heard about it, but
I never really wanted to see it. It just was. I mean, I can't. I'm not blameless, but I mean, I stopped and saw it out of that mixture of horror and so on. But with all the wars and stuff going on now, we are just shown just things that we were not ever designed to see as society. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's interesting. Your generation and even a bit younger now are kind of already talking about, okay, I have to stop this. I'm going to get a Nokia old-fashioned phone, right? And I'm going to have my internet for when I'm online, and this is my phone calls and texts. And I do see that whether it will ever get big enough, and particularly whether it will, I worry that it'll be a sort of underclass who just fed all the garbage and regurgitate all the garbage. And that's very bad for them, of course, and very bad for society. And whether it'll be more educated middle classes who will make these life choices not to engage with that. I
mm,
worry how that holds together as a whole piece. I think that's possible.
that's
But I do think
funny.
it's interesting that the
That's
younger
funny.
generation of, sorry?
That's funny because that it used to be the other way around, how lower classes couldn't afford such luxuries and middle or upper classes could afford it. And you're predicting it will switch.
Yeah, could be that leading a simpler life is what or a less connected life is what the middle and upper classes choose to do. But I don't know. Do you detect among your friends or even a little bit younger that people are like, okay, I've got to manage this now because the world's not going to manage it for me?
A couple friends are less on technology. A couple definitely are, but I haven't
Are you
sensed it enough.
are you on TikTok and Snapchat and everything?
So I deleted TikTok and Snapchat. I have WhatsApp for work. I have Facebook and Instagram, and I do that just because.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm on X. I've been on X since it was Twitter way back in the day, and I'm on WhatsApp. And that's it. Never been on Facebook. I
Mm.
had to delete TikTok, too addictive.
Yeah, yeah, it's
And
terrible.
of course, even YouTube now has all the shorts. They're pretty addictive too.
Mm,
That's enough. Three social medias, way enough.
mm. Anyway, the Zoom meeting is coming to a close. We have a few more minutes.
Hmm.
But I thank you very much for your time, and
Pleasure.
these are very, very interesting topics. And when I'm editing this, I'm going to be really thinking about lots of things that you said. Just if you could summarize some of the things that um, you've mentioned, and maybe give the viewers, obviously there's thousands of them, um, give
Mum
them
and dad, yeah.
give them a final thought or little idea.
Well, I think education is kind of everything. I sort of come back to that at the end of the day. It's incredible thing to be involved in because it's both eternally hopeful and eternally depressing. It's incredibly addictive like that. You're like, it's going to solve everything. It's amazing. And you get a buzz and everyone's into it. And then nothing really changes or tiny changes that you hardly notice. And then, and you go, oh, I'll do it again. But if you really look back at the world, it's education which moves everything, culture, science, progressiveness, also reactionary education, which goes away from progressiveness. So I do think this age, which is incredibly new and exciting and disruptive, needs new education. And I do think that interdisciplinary mindsets and interdisciplinary experiences for students equip them better for the modern age than a lot of other education. So that's what I would like to leave young people thinking about is like, what education do you think you need right now and probably will need in the future? And is it even likely to be the same as what your parents had and your grandparents had? Because that's what most other people are doing. So yeah, I'm addicted to the whole education thing. It's fascinating, and you have to pitch really high and aim for the stars, but you're going to realize that some of the time most of the time, going to fall over. You're not going to get to stars, and you're going to be left thinking about the journey and what you didn't achieve and how it was exciting along the way, rather than actually getting there. But that's kind of life, isn't it, in a way?
Mm, mm. I think the for me the X factor point that you made for me is the mindset, because that's a very big part of coaching and elite sports. But the methods of your university and the students who learn the methods, that creates a mindset to repeat in other areas, and I think that's
Mm.
fantastic. That's
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we're aiming for, and it's interesting that you catch that, Sammy, because some people say, "Oh, but you can't teach that, can you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can. I can't necessarily measure it for you, but I can show you 300 graduates who've got that mindset." So I think it's so important to have this, even though I can't, necessarily give you a number on a piece of paper proving it. But it's great that you saw that as a definite thing which you believe exists.
I see it every day in
Cool.
what I do. So
Great.
that's
Great.
brilliant. I'm going to pause
Super.
now.
Yeah.
Bye-bye to the viewers. Thank you so much to Professor Carl Gombrich, an amazing speaker and an amazing perspective that everyone can definitely think about and learn from and grow from. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sammy.